welcome back to another new video, and this is an extension of my previous video where I showed you how I drew the sketch using the grid method. So if you haven't watched that already, go check that out. For today's drawing, I'm using a charcoal pencil, and this one is by Camlin and it is of neutral hardness. That means it's not too soft and it's not too hard. When it comes to charcoal pencils, it is always better to start with the darkest areas first because these pencils produce a lot of dust and you can use those dust to shade all the lighter areas. As you can see, I'm starting with the darkest areas of the eyes first and then I'll slowly move on to the rest of the face. Now to blend everything, I'm using a blending stump. This one is by Stettler and this is the smallest one that I can find. As you can see, as soon as I start blending, the blending stump is going to get dirty. But you can use that dirty blending stump to shade in the rest of the area just like this. Also, the shaded area becomes quite dull, so you need to add another layer of charcoal and repeat the same thing. Now for some highlights, I'm going to use a stick eraser. This one is by Tombow Mono and I'm absolutely in love with this eraser, and I'll leave a link to all the materials that I used in this particular video. For some light shading, I'm using a brush. This one is a flat brush, but I also use a round brush and pick up some of those pencil dust, and I'm going to use that for my shading. If this is the first time for you to use a charcoal pencil, then keep this in mind. Never use a charcoal pencil to do any light shading because this won't blend as good as graphite. So the only way for you to get a lighter shade is by using these leftover pencil shavings, or you can also use charcoal powder if you have them. That is the main reason for you to start with the darkest colors first, because that way you can use the dust. When it comes to drawing a face with charcoal, you need to be extremely careful with it because just as I said, you can only start with the darkest colors first. So you need to get your sketch as accurate as possible, and that's why I explained more about that in my previous video. So if you haven't watched that, go check that out. It's going to be so helpful for you. Now you can see me draw the hair on the left side of the face, and I do this because this is going to create some charcoal dust and I'm going to use that dust to shade the rest of the face. Another way of doing a very light shading is by using a cotton ball. This is just some plain cotton that I just rounded up, and I'm going to use this and dab it on the leftover pencil shavings, and I'm going to use that to shade the right side of the face. When it comes to drawing portraits, the only thing that you need to focus on is the shading. Just keep this in mind, your face is not made up of one single muscle, it's actually made up of groups of muscles, and also your bone structure is going to be different, and there will be a layer of fat on top of those muscles, and the skin that is covering everything up will have lots of ups and downs in them. That's why you need to focus more on shading. When it comes to hair, you only need to shade the darkest areas and don't worry about highlights and don't worry about midtones. We can always erase them using a stick eraser, and that's why you can see me draw only the darkest areas. With charcoal pencils, you don't necessarily have to sharpen them as often as color pencils, but when it comes to drawing these thin details like these hair strands, very thin hair strands, you need a very sharp pencil. And also don't put too much pressure on your pencil and just let the pencil glide along the paper. Once I'm done laying down all the charcoal that I want for the hair, I'm going to blend it with a brush, and as you can see, all those areas which I've left white are now covered with those charcoal dust, and it's going to give me some nice midtones. Charcoal can be easily lifted off with a kneadable eraser. This one is by Faber-Castell and it can be kneaded to any fine point, any fine shape. So it's a very helpful tool when it comes to charcoal. This is why I really love charcoal because it's a very forgiving medium. You can easily lift off those charcoal and you can easily erase if you make a mistake, and also it's very dark and intense. Just as I did before, I'm going to use the charcoal dust that came out of drawing those hair strands, and I'm going to use that to shade the neck. When it comes to drawing the eyelashes, you need to take a note of the direction of where it goes, and also don't overdo the eyelashes. Keep it sparse and keep it minimal. If you add lots of eyelashes, it's not going to look natural. Now comes my favorite part of the whole process, and that is drawing all these flyover hairs, because in my opinion all these tiny strands of hair that is way out of place, way out of order, is going to make the drawing look much more natural, much more realistic, and I totally loved it. To bring back the highlights on all those hair strands, I used the stick eraser. Drawing a portrait is one of the toughest things to try, and I know I didn't squeeze in all the information for you. So if you want me to break down all those features, then let me know in the comment section. For the final step, I'm going to use this Fixative by Camlin, and this is going to prevent the charcoal from smudging. All the materials that I used in this particular video are linked in the description box, so feel free to check that out. And that's it for today. I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye. Take care.